story of my life, and I shall proceed to do so. I'm just going to follow the general instructions from Roland, that we can, and we, that we can kind of read in and out of between our personal lives as writers, and
The report.
the cultural, I mean, the culture under which we operated. Since I am 100 years old, the story begins at the time when maybe you were not born yet. So maybe it will be interesting information to you. First, as I said yesterday, I never wanted to be anything other than a writer. This was partly because I had a mother who was a writer of short stories, and who was one of the first women journalists in the Philippines. This is the pre-war area, and she wrote for the Herald. And in my mind, being a writer was equivalent with being a reporter or a journalist. This I did not separate in my mind. And all the novels that I read as a child, you're familiar with them, Little Women, you know. We didn't have Adarna books and Lampara books in those days, so all my readings were Western. And the heroines of these, what you now call young adult novels, were girls, little girls who wanted to be writers. So Anne of Green Gables, Jo March and Little Women, etc., etc. So I wanted to be like them. And it was that comic strip character called Brenda Starr, who had stars in her eyes and red hair, and a mystery man called Basil St. John, who had an eye patch. So that's part of the dream, no, of becoming a writer, and I'd have a Basil St. John. However, the environment was not really that friendly to women journalists. Only wanted to be allowed to first of all even get a job. Women of her class were not expected to work. It was an embarrassment to the family. And my Lola, who was a widow, had her closest male relative talk to my mother to convince her not to do such a stupid thing. And my mother asked why. And the reply was, after much hemming and hawing, the reply was, because you will be surrounded by men. So the idea was that a woman journalist was dangerously flirting with disreputable reputation. It's true, but there was still a prejudice against women working for some men. So many women that I knew who had a career had to give them up, had to give up that career. My husband was not like that, thank goodness. Anyway, my beginnings as a writer were in campus journalism. I went to school in a colegio, St. Paul, and I worked for the school paper, became its editor-in-chief. And then when I got to college in UST, also Catholic University, which in those days, by the way, was had a very strict policy of segregation by gender. So we had separate entrances and exits, separate corridors, separate classrooms when the population of the college permitted it. My college was very small, so we couldn't have that kind of very strict segregation. But in the classroom, the women sat in front, the men behind. But when we entered the Varsitarian office, we could commingle. That is why so many people applied to become staff members of the Varsitarian and the other student organizations. If you were caught, they would ring a bell on campus. If you were walking on campus with a guy, he would ring a bell, and everyone would come to a standstill, and he would confiscate your ID. And you then had to go to his office to claim it and explain why you were there with a boy. But if you had a card, press card, then you were allowed to go. So in my mind, being a journalist was also associated with freedom and independence. So I valued it a great deal. And I think I gave more of my time to writing for the school paper than to my studies. I eventually became editor-in-chief, but this is also interesting to reveal to you the state of mind of women in my time. I applied only to be managing editor. I didn't apply to be editor-in-chief. In my mind, the editor-in-chief was always a man and a medical student. In UST during the time, the editor-in-chief always came from the medical school. I don't know why. So they were the gods on campus. And then they named me editor-in-chief. And I turned it down. I said, I don't want to be editor-in-chief. I thought that this is my position. I'm quite willing to take a back seat to a man, provided he is excellent. And I assumed that those medical students would be excellent. So you know what, we had we had two advisors, one lay advisor and one priest. The priest and the layman went to my parents' home to convince me to accept the job. My hesitation came from the fact that I didn't think the men would be willing to work under me. Because they wanted to be editors-in-chief, they applied for the post, about 3 of them. And they solved it, the advisors solved it by naming them executive editor, managing editor, and some other editor, but I was editor-in-chief. And the advisor said to me, don't worry about it, they will take care of the press work for you. You don't have to do that because you're a girl. We don't work in the printery. They will do that, the dirty job, the dirty work. You can sit in your desk and edit. So, okay lang sa akin. So this is what happened. Even while I was a student journalist, I was already publishing in the national papers. I started when I was a junior in high school, contributing feature articles to magazines and becoming part of the staff of what was then called a teenage magazine. It was called Young World. We didn't do any editing. We just wrote and then we sent our contributions. But when I was a sophomore in college, I sent contributions to the Manila Chronicle, which with the Manila Times were the 2 leading newspapers. And they were accepted. And eventually I was offered a column, a teenage column, a youth column. There was a youth section in all the papers. That column ran from my sophomore year to the time that I graduated. And in my senior year, I was also offered a job with the graphic magazine. I became youth editor. When I graduated, there were these 2 jobs waiting for me. I'm telling you this because it was fairly easy for us to get jobs then with media. And in UST, the so-called writing college, which was philosophy and letters or philets, all the faculty were practicing journalists. They were editors of newspapers. So they would spot the people they thought were talented and offer them jobs. So I had 2 jobs waiting, either assistant women's editor in graphic or reporter in the Chronicle. By that time, I had already discovered what being a reporter meant, and it involved the police beat, which is where all the young writers started out, police beat. So I thought, yoko niya. And also I preferred the face in a magazine. But then, assistant women's editor, I was 19. I didn't know how to cook, I didn't know how to take care of babies, I didn't know anything that had to do with the house, nor was I interested in these things. So I didn't want that kind of job. But I accepted it anyway. At the same time, I became editor-in-chief of the Versitarian. And I accepted also, with the great foolishness of very young people, a teaching job. So I was doing all of that at the same time. Graphic, I was studying, I was in my MA, doing my MA, and teaching. Also, I had met the man I would eventually marry. And he was also a writer. At the time that I met him, he had an MA in economics. His degree was in economics, but he was doing an MA in philosophy. He was editor-in-chief naman of the Philippinensian, which was the yearbook of UP, which at that time had a literary section. We were both supposed to go to the States. This was the dream of most of the young college undergraduates in my time. So I was supposed to go to Fordham, he was supposed to go to Stanford. We decided to give up the MAs and stay home and get married. You can imagine? Only if you're 20 will you come to such a decision. This disappointed my parents very deeply, as well as his parents, I'm sure, though he didn't tell me that. He was he considered himself a Marxist. He had believed himself to be a Marxist for some time. He was also an atheist, which was exactly what my parents had feared if they had sent me to UP. That I would fall in love with a Marxist and an atheist, and that I would lose my virginity. Anyway, so that's what happened. And then I decided to give up the graphic because it was, I figured, difficult to combine journalism with the life of a married woman who would expect to have a family. My generation never considered not having children. We also never considered not marrying. Yung ngayon, so many single women, my own daughters, only one decided to get married. In my time, if you were not married by 24, you were on your way to spinsterhood. And the older people would say, ay naku, napagpilian na lahat ng mga lalaki niyan pagka naghintay ka. So if you find someone you like, marry him na. Okay, so I chose to stay in academia. And it has been my job since. I teach. I've been teaching. Even when I was abroad, I also taught. But I recurrently return to journalism, writing columns or sending articles out, both abroad and here. Okay. Regarding the literary scene, I don't think there was a literary scene as such, nor was there a literary community. The literary titles that were published were pitifully few. And I'm talking about the time I was still an undergraduate. And the bookstores, they didn't carry Filipino titles except for maybe one shelf at the back of the room. And it was called Filipiniana. The exception was Solidaridad when it was established. But then I was already a senior. And then there was Erewhon, established by Tony Abaya. These two, but they mainly carried foreign titles also. And then some Filipiniana. As for literary publishers, well, there was the Benipayo Press, which was mainly a printing press. Although they sometimes published yung mga peso books. Did you ever come across them? Okay, that tells what age you are, if you remember. And then there was Legal Publishing that published a few of the titles of, I think, maybe Nick Joaquin and Frankie Jose, and maybe Kerima, I forget now. The only publisher that was set up in the 60s for literary titles was New Day. But New Day only carried writers who already had a kind of name. So if you were already being published in the magazines, then they were willing to take a chance on you. Otherwise, nothing. Royalties, I think they paid 5% or something like that. I don't remember what royalties. First time I got a check, by the way, for my column, my mother said, I gave it to my mother, you know, I'm contributing to the household. It was for 100 pesos. And she said, I think I shall frame it and hang it in your rooms. UST, the publishing house of UST, was established in 1593. So it is actually older than the university, which is 1611. That's the foundation day of UST. And it has been in operation since. But the whole time that I was both studying and teaching there, they did not carry trade titles or literary titles, nothing like that. It was all scholarly essays in monographs and sometimes textbooks. UP Press was only established in 1965 with Elmer Ordonez as the first director, and I think France also had a part in it, and Lagmay and Ilio. And they, one of them, I think it was Elmer who told me, they used to publish one book a year. This gives you an idea of what the publishing scene was like during that time. Ateneo Press was established in 1972, much later. Martial law na yun. And LaSalle, 1983. So for the longest time, it was a bit of a desert. So we, of course, no creative writing programs, no creative writing classes, no creative writing workshops, until Silliman established the Silliman workshop in the 60s. I was in college, 63. And it was a heartbreaking thing for me that my best friend got invited and I did not. And they only invited like 5 writers, I think. It was very, very small. Okay, so now back to personal. I got married. I graduated in 1964, which is when I got married. No. Wait, when did I get married? 66. So 2 years after. I was 21. He was 22. Of course, my parents were dismayed. And my father said to me, "You're marrying him? He's a boy." Sabi ko naman, I'm a girl. Anyway, Tony's job was assistant instructor in UP, earning 240 pesos a month. And he was teaching in the College of Economics and taking an MA in philosophy. I was an instructor in UST with a salary of 450 pesos. When he asked me to marry him, I'm like, what shall we live on? So he gave up his job in UP, he gave up writing. So, patas na kami. I gave up my MA kasi I was about to leave na when I met him. So, yun, he gave up what he wanted to do, me. So, that's just the romantic side. I did not publish a short story until I was, I think, 25. Essays came very easily to me, and I kept publishing, as I said, from high school. But short story, what does that say? 15 minutes more. Short story only when I was 25, and I could only publish one story a year. I mean, that was my pace, no? It was nahirapan akong sumulat ng short stories. Let's see. When we left because of Marshall. Maybe I'll talk about this first. The 60s, as you know, of course, were a turbulent time, leading up to the first quarter storm, which eventually ended up in the declaration of martial law. At that time, Tony had left his job with a multinational company. Hindi ko na ikukwento yung paano siya napunta dun sa multinational company, ha? Pero he left it to go back to teaching, and not in UP, but in the Philippine College of Commerce, that's PCC. Now PUP, where he was earning really, really a pittance. And he was working for the graphic magazine as political writer. And I was teaching in USD, and I had a movie review column for the Manila Times. When martial law was declared, we lost all 4 jobs. And I was fired, never mind, I was fired. Why? Because I was an activist. My husband, it sounds funny now, no? Nobody believes me when I tell that story, but it is true. I have the letter to prove it. He was the real activist, he was the real Marxist. I was there. I think I believed in it in principle. But mostly I was there because when you get married, you decide to be together in sickness and in health. I don't know what that was, sickness or health, till death do us. I'm joking, of course. We got jobs anyway after that because, as you know, in our country, if you belong to a privileged class, you always have the right contacts. So eventually, Tony was hired by DAP, and I was hired by UP. So it was actually, it was so funny. It was UP thought, ay, UST conservative ito. So they hired me. But I was fired by UST for being radical. So, and DAP was a government think tank established by Marcos. Tony thought that in the beginning, or he convinced himself Marcos was serious about reform. He co-opted a lot of the activists, even Luis Teodoro, Ninochka Rosca, Pinta Roy, Ben Cervantes. They all worked for this cultural arm of DAP. Tony eventually saw it was a sham, so when he was offered a job with UNICEF, he took it. And we lived abroad from 1975 to 1990. Now, while I was living abroad, I went on writing as a journalist as well as short stories. I won my first palanca while I was living in Beirut. I had no, I found out about it 2 months later because the mail system was very bad. There were no cell phones, no telegraph system in Beirut. It was down because of the war. So I found out in a letter sent by my mother, sent via diplomatic pouch, that I had won a palanca. And I could only tell my little daughter, who was the only one there in the house with me at the time. I said, Anna, I won a palanca, third prize. And she said, Gina, you should try harder next time. So I got no satisfaction with my palanca prize. I found it difficult to write fiction while I was living that kind of vagabond life. Later, when I thought of it, I think it's because fiction demands that you be rooted. And of course, when my roots were in the Philippines, the longer we stayed away, the more difficult it was to write fiction. So I turned to travel writing. And that's why I ended up publishing 10 or something like that travel books. And fiction only 5 and 2 novels. Okay. Creative writing in English today. I think the most startling development in creative writing for me is the establishment of academic degree programs in creative writing. When I came home, I could not believe this. Going from that scenario that I was describing to you to finding that universities were offering creative writing degrees was amazing. And then the creative writing workshops, which had become an institution, so that all writers felt they had to go through this, Siliman, UP, Ateneo, La Salle, all of that. And then the creative writing centers. For a long time, the only thing I knew of was the UP Creative Writing Center. I would like to say at this point that while all writers, and I'm talking here I think not only about the writers in English anymore, but also the writers in Filipino, I think the distinction that Rizal Mojares pointed to in his pioneering book no longer obtains. No? I don't think the writers in Filipino and the writers in English occupy different spaces and have different cultures anymore. No? So what I'm saying now I think will apply also to the writers in Filipino, but June will talk about that. So I think that while the workshops and the academic programs have to a certain extent become the mode, you know, the default mode that writers think they have to go through to become professional writers, I don't think it's true that they come out of these programs or these workshops writing in one way. I don't think there is such a thing as a UP School of Writing. When I think of the UP writers, they're so different, one from the other. And I think because the panel are also not, I call it the cookie cutter mentality. I don't think it exists. There's no UST School of Writing. No? Ned and Chuck Berry do not write like each other. Nor does Ned write like Richie Guevara. These are writers in English. Chuck Berry, Joey De Los Reyes, they don't write like each other. And there are very many of these writers who've been through the workshops who do not become connected with academia. They just go there to take the workshops and then they leave, and they're very successful. For example, to name just a few, Tara Serin, Andrea Pasion, Flores, Mix Villanueva, Dean Alfars, Dean and Nikki, the La Cuestas, Muki and Sarge, Menchu Sarmiento, Dada Fres Felix, BJ Campilan, Catherine Torres, and now the neurosurgeon, Ron Rectular. They went through the workshops, but they are writing independently of academia. So that's the third, the centers. The fourth is the publishing scene. I think that People Power, however else it may have failed, did actually succeed in opening up the cultural scene again. Because during martial law, the censorship was severe, and all the publishing houses kind of died. After Cory Aquino took over, there was a real flowering. And the academic publishing houses started playing a very important role in literary publishing, which they didn't used to do. In UP, that was under the term of Jimmy Abad, where the UP Creative Writing Center then began to serve as the editorial board for literature of the UP Press. So we, the associates, we did the editing for the literary titles of the UP Press. UST has followed suit and publishes a lot of literary titles now. So that's Ateneo. I'm not sure about LaSalle.
So many now.
Mahina. But there was a time, very active din. Yeah, I remember fighting a battle for Vince Grullon's Sky Over Dimas, the LaSalle Publishing House. Okay, now the publishing scene, so that's it. Literary contests also, so many.
Yeah.
In my time, there was Palanca, and that was it, diba? National artist under Marcos. Sino naman sa atin na magiging national artist, diba? You did not apply to be national artist. But now, Matigan Gonzales, Graphic, free press pala, merong free press naman. Pero ngayon, mas marami na. Anthologies. The publishing houses, I think by accident, discovered that it's better to publish an anthology than an individual work. Why? Because the main people who buy the books anyway are relatives and friends of writers, diba? That is something we really know. Now, if you have an anthology, there are 20 authors, sometimes 50, times how many relatives, how many friends, sold out na ang first edition. Di, ang dami-daming anthologies. And then, well, the vibrant literary community. Now we are in touch with each other, in touch with writers from other schools, and of course writers from other regions. Hopefully this particular seminar will work toward making that even more of a reality. The result of all of this, I think, is the following. First, there are many more writers than there were in my time. And, naku, nawala. Naguluhan na ako sa notes ko. Excuse me. There are more professions for writers also. In my time, only two. Teaching and media. You either became a reporter or you were a teacher. Now, teaching, media, including TV and film, PR, content writing for the net, commission writing, you know, the biographies, company history, speeches, etc., etc. Writing textbooks, of course, now is very lucrative. The net. About this, I'm very conflicted. Yung mga Wattpad, you know. Actually, and once in a while, I find something nice on the net. Published by an original piece by a writer who obviously knows what he's doing. Once in a long while, most of what I read is trash. Ungrammatical to boot. And yet, I must say, I kind of applaud anything that encourages people to read and write. No? I think to myself, optimistically, you start as a Wattpad writer, and you graduate to something else, I hope. However, there are some questions that give me pause. I recently noted an ad on the net announcing a contest for Wattpad stories, and the prize would go to, not to the best written, but to the most popular. Since popularity and even astonishing commercial success has become possible for people with no training whatsoever in writing, as well as for some people whose basic language skills can only be described as atrocious, is professionalism still a goal? I mean, because of the net, what has happened to professionalism? Is literature still expected to serve a function in society beyond instant gratification and fleeting celebrity? Do writers still see themselves as engaged in a quest for meaning, for answers to our most disturbing questions, or at least are they still involved in the articulation of some questions? Are they still trying to help shape our tallest dreams, the dream of a more just world, for example, or the dream of a safer planet? I don't think the Wattpad writers are involved in any of that. I'm just using Wattpad as a general, label. Okay. There is an unfortunate development which I want to talk about briefly. I have never talked about it much in my papers or anything, and it is the cliques or groups you know, writers have always belonged to barcadas, to cliques. I mean, you become close to the people you like, and they're usually the people in your own profession. There's nothing wrong with that in itself. Like the doctors have doctor friends, diba? So, yung the Ravens, the Veronicans, they started out that way, the UP Writers Club, and so on. But these days, there are some fringe groups of writers, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, that seem bent on picking fights and spreading ill will. They pride themselves on being anti-establishment, which is a legitimate position to take. And by the way, it's not a new one. It was the same position held by many generations of writers before them, like the English Romantic poets, the French Impressionists, the American beat poets of the 50s, the hippies of the 60s, and our own revolutionary writers. However, they seem bent on destroying reputations, on bringing down people who have earned a position of importance because of their work. Cliff Hewson talked about this in his Palangka speech, and I was much struck by the words he used. He talked about it is important for us to be kind to one another. And he mentioned the kindness that our generation of writers and the one that came immediately after us and appreciated in the writers who came before us, our elders, no, sila ni Joaquin. He said, and I quote, "We have gained from the mentorship, friendship, and care of the older writers. We never set out to scorn them who preceded us. Rather, we found strength in what they had left behind. We honored their legacy by continuing the benign tradition of building upon their accomplishments." This is a tradition I have tried to continue in my own life and in my dealings with the younger writers. And it disturbs and pains me when I hear of young writers saying such vicious things about other writers, both older than themselves and their own contemporaries. Where does this huge chip on their shoulder come from? And have social media contributed to exacerbating its weight? One of the most persistent gripes is the padrino system and the so-called power of the mainstream and the establishment. This is my last statement. What establishment? That term establishment was coined in the 60s by the hippies. They meant the Pentagon, the Joint Armed Forces, stuff like that, which are really powerful institutions in America. The literary establishment in the Philippines, what is the average print run of every book? 500 copies from poetry, 1,000 copies if it is prose. What power does this group of people actually exercise and over whom? So maybe at some point these young rebels will grow older. At some point they will grow old. And hopefully the generation that will succeed them will not be of the same bent. Thank you.